Good afternoon. Today we are celebrating World Family Literacy Day, and we're going to discuss a project of ours. It's called the School of Planning and Architecture at Vijayawada. So I'll run through some of my slides. So it's more about the influences that we had in the beginning of our career, and these influences were mostly from the schools we studied in and the colleges we studied at. So Manisha and me both, my partner Manisha and me both studied at CEPT, and then Manisha went to Bezalel for an exchange program in Jerusalem, and after which she pursued a master's at the Cornell University, and now she teaches at Kamla Raheja. I studied at CEPT, and then I went and did my master's at the Architectural Association in London, and I teach at Kamla Raheja now. So these are the 3-4 schools that we have influenced from. We were looking at the positive things that we learned there from the environments that we engaged with, and we were trying to bring those positive things in the campus we designed in Vijayawada. The other issues that we are interested in, one is working with diverse communities. And this aspect is important from the perspective of social sustainability. The other aspect was the environment and the climate. These two coming together are the keystones of our practice currently, and you will see issues like this in this project too. So the site itself, it is in Vijayawada. Can I stop here? There's a wasp again in the office. I'm sorry. So the context is Vijayawada. It is on the coastal region here, and it's very hot and humid here. So when we worked on this competition, we are very interested in understanding the climate of Vijayawada. So when we worked on this competition, it was a 2-stage competition that we won in 2012. And this is the kind of site plan that you have. It's a 10-acre site. And you can see the view on top is, the image on top is the Gundatala Hills, which is the context. And we were trying to capture these views because they're beautiful hills. And at the bottom, you see an image of the site itself. It's an aerial view. And on this 10-acre campus, we wanted to build only on 7 because we wanted 3 acres to be left for recreational areas like sports areas so that the students have some open space. So when you're building on a 7-acre site with more than 500,000 square feet of built up area, you're building close to 2 FSI. So that's a challenge in an institute. So the SPAs are institutes of national importance, but and they get 50 acres of land, but the SPA Vijayawada got only 10. So it was a challenge there. And if you are building 2 FSI, you would end up going at least 7 to 10 stories. But we wanted to keep the institutional scale at 5 floors and the residential scale at 3 floors, so that the density is a little higher, but you could achieve the scales that you wanted. So that's the master plan. You see the ITI road on the top. That's where my mouse goes. And you can see the institute right adjacent to it. Incidentally, the ITI road is actually an institutional road. There is a ITI school, there is a Loyola College, there is a Ramesh Hospital. So there are various institutes here. And the residential area behind that is the girls' hostel here and the boys' hostel here, with the dining hall here and the visiting faculty on top of it. So that's the lay of the land. That's the master plan. And initially, when we went there, we realized a few things. The intent was to create social spaces that are embedded in its cultural context, along with an environmentally sensitive response to create a built environment which enables learning and living as a community. So this is a photograph that really intrigued us. You can see people are doing Rangoli here, and this is a part of their culture. But you can also see something interesting. They're using umbrellas. And we realized that an umbrella is a very, very important shield if you had to work or move around in Vijayawada. And that stayed with us. That stayed with us. So when we started developing the form, we were developing the building. The idea was, so you can see the site just for the institute is a 50 by 100 block, like a super block. We were looking at it as a super block. And that's the program with stacked all together. and we put a parasol or an umbrella on top of it. In the next stage, we realized, why do we have a independent parasol? We make the stack as a parasol and we split the building. And then we added porosity to it. We needed winds to move through this porosity, and we added structure, we added textures, and that was the form. So this is the next study we did, which is mapping the light and shadows. The idea is that we wanted people, students, and even faculty to take classes sometimes or interact in open areas. Now, open areas, I mean, in Vijayawada, you couldn't be in the open. You at least needed a roof. So we were looking at the shade and shadow of this mass, and we were looking at places we could infuse program. So this was done over the year and the days, day and night, I mean morning to night. And that's the climatic strategy. So the roof form has been modulated to receive natural north light within the studio. So that's the top block that I'm talking about, which we call the parasol. And there are high ceilings and voids that enable cross ventilation from here. Yeah. This is the south side, that's the north side. That's why the north lights are here. They always fold to bring in north lights. And the lower part of the building is been embedded into the ground to reduce solar heat gain. So you can also see some green sort of gardens on top of roofs here. And that's the climatic strategy. There are smaller elements like solar panels, a lot of other strategies, but largely this is the idea for the climate. And if you look at the other sectional strategies, where the programming strategies, the studios are on top, the workshops are below, which is generally held in the afternoon. So you go up in the studios in the morning and workshops below. Leisure is in between. And if you look at the elements of architecture, you have a green roof, you have a roof that is modulated, you have a pavilion in between, you have a plinth, and the architectural or the formal configuration of a roofscape, flotation, urbanscape, embedded below. Those are the ideas that we were working with. And in plan, the lower part of the building, there are 3 stacks basically in principle: platform, which is like a center and periphery arrangement for effective interactive learning. In between is the concourse, which is like a field. It's like for informal network exchange. So we want to foster this idea of students coming together and having exchange all the time, so that there is a high amount of interaction and learning. And the top part, which is the parasol, which is more like a grid, it's efficient for focused learning. That's how the programs are stacked up then. Lower part, the auditorium here, the library here, and the exhibition, along which all the workshops have been strung along behind. So these are the public programs, and also the heavier programs. You have books, you have heavier elements that you need here. And as you go up, you see the concourse here, where you have the administration, you have the general body meeting area. Now this is very important because students congregate here, and this is a space for them. So it's more like talking about their independence, their a democratic space, and then the canteen next to it. As we go above, you have 2 stacks of the faculty offices and 2 more floors of the studios. Now that's after we add circulation. Now you see a lot of voids, and the circulation has been added through these voids to connect all these spaces. And those are the plans. So you see the auditorium, which actually slopes up and comes to the general body area. That's the exhibition, library, auditorium, all the workshops. That's the green garden that brings you up to the general body meeting area, the administration waiting area, administration, canteen here. Those are the faculty offices here. Now these faculty offices have gardens connected on this side, if you can see on the eastern side. And also they overlook these spaces. And the 4th and 5th floor as the studios. They are double height overlooking studios. That's the section where the idea of bringing the street gently into the building. That's the general body meeting with the library below it. That's the building that bridges across. And you can see the same section in the other direction. It kind of forms a gateway in some sense. There is also a basement which has cars, so you don't have cars floating around on the campus. That's an animation that will give you some sense of the variation section throughout. So you are seeing these studios that fold up on the roof and allow north light to come in. You can see the auditorium here slowly coming up and now joining the concourse. That starts joining, becoming a part of the general body meeting space. The building now bridges across. You see these small bridges, the large building bridging. Now this bridges across onto the other side and it comes to the eastern side. So you started at the west, you come to the east with this double helix staircase now in the voids, and you come to the eastern gardens on top of the concourse. So these are the eastern gardens, and the building you can see is been pushed behind so that you get eastern gardens on the concourse here. So that's the view, a photograph of the building from the western side. You can see what we're trying to do is very clearly not have any openings on the western side. If there are, they're deep balconies, but no glazing. And you're overlooking galleries that overlook the sports area on the sports side. These galleries also can see the Gundadala Hills. You can view the Gundadala Hills from here. That's what I showed you in the beginning. And you can see these columns from here. We've taken them away because large part of the view of Gundadala Hills is from these areas. So also the idea of you being able to walk right across and come into the concourse. You can actually, pedestrians can walk over the roof. This is a green roof. And on the eastern side, the building being pushed behind and forming those gardens on the eastern side. So the materials we're using is, again, we've clad this with calibrated tandoor stone. Tandoor is very local. It's very close to this area. And above it's Spartan in that sense. We don't plaster this building. It's fair face concrete. And you can see only the northern side has been, we've used fenestration to bring in light, the favorable north light. That's the central space when you come up from either from the right-hand side, which is the auditorium roof, or the entrance from here on the left-hand side. You come to the general body meeting space. And you can also see this element that peels down. This is actually a crit space where a lot of the juries happen in this folded staircase here. It's a large staircase. It's more like an amphitheater up there floating on the, and you see these louvers here. Actually, these are the faculty blocks that overlook this space. So as you go up these blocks, you can start connecting with the city, with the landscape across. There are a lot of green trees, tree canopies. And you can also see the sectional variation of terraces looking into courtyards, and these allow for interconnectivity. So the idea is, although you have these slabs, you're still interconnected. So you actually can see from the ground floor, which is a courtyard which has a garden, right up to the 5th floor. So this is always visually kind of interconnected. And you can see these volumes that create spatial drama here. So that's the Gundadala Hills. You can see them being framed here, and those galleries that you can overlook. Yeah, and this is a double helix staircase, which actually is an interesting element because you increase capacity on plan. On the same plan, you have two staircases. So one taking off from this side and the other from the other side. So it's more an idea that they intertwine. It's a kind of an Escherian element, a playful element, just to increase capacity actually. So when we drew it, it was very interesting, and we're really happy to see it built the same way. There are many staircases in this building, and more like a catalog of staircases for students. So single flights, all sorts of dog legs. So you don't need actually to study staircases through drawings. You have staircases of different types here, and you can study them in your building. And you can see the interconnectivity, right through across from the top 5th floor, right across to this is the 1st floor, and that's the concourse there. And these galleries that frame the hills, you can see the hills behind there. This is an element in the beginning, and this is some of the learnings that we had from the schools we've studied in, it's called the learning corridor. So this is the top floor plan of the studios. So the studios are all across, but what you see is the corridor. It's a 10-meter by 100-meter corridor where all the lecture rooms and the spaces in between that are hatched, tile hatched, are for juries and for pinups. So this whole element is actually for interaction, where you can have juries here, you can have vivas here. And when students have these juries and vivas in these spaces, you can expect other students to walk across and see what's going on. So we're trying to break this hermetic idea of studios, where studios become insular and silos, and learning is constant. So what we're trying to achieve is that even if you're a second-year student, you're learning from the fourth year. And sometimes even a thesis student would want to see what a second year student is doing. Although you finish second year, you can still learn from a second year student. So I think learning is constant, and you still want to interact with the others through this corridor. That's the space it is. You can see it's quite a dynamic space where people would sort of pin up and work in areas here. And the same corridor when it comes to the voids to bring in more light and ventilation. And these are the studios inside when they are sort of overlooking spaces where north lights bring light. It's a folded section. So you see both of these studios get north light. And this is at the night. You can see the studios overlooking each other. And this is a view from the southern side, more from the hostel side, where you can see the sky and the top block, which is the fair-faced concrete block, and the faculty spaces, which is a lot of light coming in, but we have this cotton steel lure. It's a weathered steel, so it forms a kind of a rusted texture. And the lowest part, which is the building in stone, which is the tandoor stone. So these are the three main elements that have been used to compose this building with the voids of the building. And those are the drawings, the wall sections where you filter light, you cantilever so that you can catch views, landscape coming into the building over the auditorium. And wherever we had windows, we try to deep set them in so that the southern light is not. So this is on the south side and this is on the north side. Again, overlooking ground from the top and looking at the sky, framing the sky in some sense. And this is the reversal. In the day, you want these deep shadows on the western side. And by the time it's night, the building's been lit now. It will look very different when it's lit up. So you can see across the road now, from across the road, we're looking at the building where you can actually walk over this garden to enter this GBM space. So it's very porous. And this whole section is framing the Gunadala Hills and the North Lights. Happy students, day of inauguration. They waited for this campus for long. It's happened. And them using the space, the GBM space, and some students and faculty have started sketching what is happening with their own sketches, and which is really heartening for us to see. That's how they use the space, and that's a sketch about one of the students. This is Republic Day. So all these spaces that we envisaged are being used really actively as outdoor spaces. Now I come to the housing of this campus. This is the student housing. That's the girls' hostel. That's the boys' hostel. And that's the plaza where the dining hall happens, so people congregate there. That's the overall master plan. So we were working around the idea of courtyards. So predominantly what's different in sort of the DNA of the institute and the housing is that we were working on a 10 meter by 10 meter grid there. And here we are working on a 5 meter by 5 meter grid. So essentially to bring down the scale, we are working on a smaller grid. But the idea was to use courtyards. So these are either 5 meter by 10 meter, etc. So the module is 5 meters here. And we had 25 courtyards. The attempt was to create organizational variation, change, and flexibility by integrating program with non-program spaces, fostering both the collective and the individual. So this is, in a sense, what we tried to do. So through the process, we were always trying to bring this through, the idea of making bridges, verandas, terraces, streets. Conceptually, that's the section. So you can see below is all the morning spaces or the afternoon spaces, let's say, day spaces, because they're shaded. And they're also porous, so you can see this textured jali below. And the evening spaces are more these terraces and decks that have been composed or carved into the section so that the evening can be cooler, is cooler, and those spaces can be used by the time it's night. Yeah. So students can come out at night on these terraces. And in terms of typology, we were trying to create a hybrid, which is a combination of the single loaded, double loaded, and corridors around the courtyard and bring them together. And this is an animation that will give you an idea. This is the girls' hostel, carve out the courtyards. And then we run along the courtyard, connect them with a stilt area so that there's continuous connectivity. Then connect those courtyards and stilts with vertical circulation and again with horizontal circulation. So the connection is always at the courtyards so that people are communicating with each other, interacting with each other. And that's the horizontal. And as you come up, you start seeing terraces. So you see multiple terraces forming, which create these possibilities of personal spaces or smaller scale spaces. DNA, again, coming to 3 blocks. Each of these blocks had different kinds of programs. You can see a stilt area, you can see a deck, you can see single and double rooms, and you can see a terrace. You can see rooms and toilets here. You can see rooms, staircases here with the terrace. So these are the 3 DNA blocks that are used, and these come together to form the entire block. I'll have to skip this. Yeah. And these are the 3 modules. So you can see very clearly that if you use these 3 modules in combinations, you would get that big block. So it's a larger block that has A, B, and C, and it comes with all the terraces, decks, staircases, corridors. So once you have a DNA block and you have your courtyards, you just use these blocks, play them around to achieve the kind of spaces that you need. So it's more like, how do you cluster spaces? These are the plans. So it's modular in some sense. All the single rooms are exactly the same size. The double rooms are exactly the same size. But if you look at it, even the toilets are all modular. But if you look at it, there is nothing modular about it in terms of how you sort of move through these spaces. So the lower part, the ground floor is very porous in that sense with the courtyards and the stilts. The first floor has some decks, but more denser than the ground floor. The second floor is also very dense, few decks and terraces. And the third floor is, you can see many more terraces and for those spaces that you can use in the evening. So although the DNA has it, you don't have to work them out actually. So here you can see the conceptual idea of the section itself, where these terraces become active in the evening. And you can see these jalis which allow the cool winds to go through the courtyards and push the hot wind out of the block itself. That's what it would look like in one of the courtyards. Again, the scale is very human here. So the idea of bringing it to 5 meters here was that you can relate to a residential, more scale of living as against an institutional scale where you could see the height was higher and the spans were bigger. So here it's the more human scale that we are working with. Now with the 25 courtyards that you have, each of the elevations of all these, so we have 100 elevations of these courtyards, let's say, each of these elevations are different. That's because of the strategy we've used of using this modular idea and playing with them. And these are courtyards. You can see these stilt areas connecting in transition with the courtyards. You can see cascading terraces connecting with these courtyards visually. And you can see courtyards seamlessly merging with the stilt. Courtyards which create pockets of light and built form. And a labyrinth of interconnected voids. This is how students are using them very informally. And this is how you see light and shadow. This is for the cool winds to go through at the ground level, where then through the courtyards, the hot winds would rise. And the relationship of the terraces and the corridors and the courtyards below. And these are the decks at the first floor where you see communication across. This is at the top floor. Now you start seeing interconnectivity, terraces and open spaces. These also create a lot of shadows. So I think the idea is to create shade and shadow. And the open-endedness of these corridors above. Framing the sky again. There again, some of the courtyards. From outside. This is how the entire campus sits in its context. That's the hills that we were talking about. This is from the eastern side, I would say southeastern side. So we've tried to maintain the height, although we had to work at a 2 FSI, the idea was to keep it as low as possible. And this is the only part that went a little higher, and all our water tanks sit here, so we have a gravity feed. That's where the visiting faculty actually live when they come. Otherwise, most of the students who live here all the time are within a ground and 3 environment. I hope you enjoyed the presentation. If you have any questions, I'd be happy to answer, glad to answer your questions. So please let us know, type in the chat box and we'll get back to you. Thank you.